So what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about maintaining information. The topic theme is to, I thought it was a nice play on words to talk about the life of Pi. The Life of Pi, if you know, is a classic book that talks about the story of an Indian boy who is shipwrecked at sea, is the only survivor in the life raft, and then finds that he is joined by Richard. Now, unfortunately, Richard is an adult tiger because him and his family were transporting their zoo from India to England. So Richard the tiger climbs onto the life raft with him. So you'll notice that there's a very strong tiger theme. So I leveraged Canva.com's text-to-image AI tool to generate some nice images for you. Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. All right. So now to share my screen. As we go through the talk, if you have any questions, please just raise your hand. Howard, if I could ask you to interrupt me if I'm not seeing.
Definitely. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Good. All right, and we're off. All right, so unfortunately, there it is. Okay, good. Good. So can you see my share?
Yes, we can.
Good. So off on the life of Pi. First of all, just a bit about me. I have a long career in IT and then a slightly as long career in IT governance consulting. And obviously I've done quite a bit of privacy over the years as well. And we will be talking specifically today, we'll specifically talk about the POPI Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act. So that is the South African privacy legislation. If you don't know, the privacy legislations are 80% the same because they're all based on the OECD guidelines. So your GDPR specific questions, yeah, throw them in. I'll certainly answer them. Just one caveat, of course, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving legal advice, and nothing I say in here should be taken as that. And you do need to consult with a lawyer to get clarity on these things. All I'm doing is giving you a guideline on the right questions to ask, right, as you go into it. And then hopefully between Howard and myself, we'll be able to give you some practical steps to use or tools that you can use to make POPI or make privacy a manageable beast in your world. So, and thank you very much to Howard and to Damas at Southern Africa for this collaboration effort. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak about privacy at every opportunity I can get.
Thank you.
And yeah, hopefully we are actually putting the data back into data management. Eh?
Yes.
The idea, yeah. All right, so the life cycle approach to data protection. How to tame that tiger in your boat. I think we're all starting to get to grips with it now. But I think it still does strike fear in people's hearts, or at very least a lot of angst or just complete frustration. So the life cycle, we started our first session this year on the disposal of data. And then last month we talked about storing data, and this month we talked about maintaining that data. In the months to coming, in July, we're going to be talking about using personal information. And then the various topics that the life cycle going through. And the reason I started with the back of the life cycle is because it all sort of builds. Part of maintaining PI is to have a proper retention policy, which is what we spoke about in the dispose of PI. A large part of maintaining personal information around keeping the data quality is protecting it, which is part of the story. So I found that the life cycle actually builds, the privacy concepts build on the life cycle backwards. Good, and thanks to Canva for those lovely images, so nice and bright. Alrighty, so what I want to do is just give you a quick reminder about POPIA, in case you haven't been through the million talks with me yet. And also just to make sure we're all on the same page. If you think I've got something wrong, if you have a question, let me know. But and again, this is POPI specific, so I'll mention the GDPR equivalent. So obviously, you're in the middle there. There's your company. You collect people. You collect data from people. And under POPI, of course, we include juristic persons, so company information and your supplier companies, charities, that sort of thing. So any entity or natural person, their data flows into your organization. You then flow that data over into whatever apps or suppliers or business process outsourcing partners you have, and your cloud systems. And they all qualify as operators under POPI or under GDPR, their processes. So under POPI, you are the responsible party because you collected the data. And under GDPR, you would be the controller. So if you are the service provider, then obviously you're an operator and your customer is the responsible party. And that's one of the first things with any privacy legislation, is to be very clear about what role you play. And more accurately, I would say what roles you play, because obviously it depends on the data. So the data set will have a responsible party and an operator, a controller, and a processor. Your legal department's job is to make sure you are very clear about when you are the responsible party and when you are the operator, because your obligations change. Most of the obligation falls on the responsible party, as you can imagine. Right. So just to remind you, what is the point of privacy? These privacy laws. When in any organization, we manage risk, and more specifically, we manage compliance risk. Your risk methodology needs to come into play in the way that you manage privacy as well. And privacy will impact on things like your third-party risk, your staff behavior, contractual qualities. Let me switch that off. So what POPI does, or what any privacy legislation does, is that they ask you to expand your risk monitoring, and to consider the risk to the data subject. Right. So when we're talking now about maintaining information, the risk to the data subject really comes into focus in the maintenance aspect of data. And one of the things that you have to do is make sure that you are processing information lawfully. Right. So you've got your main risk is that you are unlawfully processing personal information. And the reason is because that will interfere with the protection of personal information. And it's all about the impact on the data subject, right? So it becomes very subjective. However, what I say to people is, when you are looking at a privacy legislation, always look at the penalties, because the penalties, that is where your compliance risk comes in. Your penalties will give you almost like red beacons to warn you about when you are really stepping on toes, when you're really going to create enormous risk for the data subject. So the penalties are there to change data subject risk to company risk. And under POPI, this is very different under GDPR. Okay, so this is the one slide where it doesn't translate to GDPR at all, because penalties are very specific. And as you may have noticed, GDPR has a lot of penalties. POPI does not have a lot of penalties. Most of it rests on civil litigation. So no, where people are allowed to sue you in a civil proceeding. But penalties and actual fines and so forth are applied almost immediately on account numbers, like the way that you manage account numbers. So by the account number, what they mean is any number or set of numbers that gives access to funds. So it's financial account numbers. So you can think about credit cards. It's obvious, bank account details, PayPal account details, all of that sort of thing. Prior authorization. If you're doing something that requires prior authorization and you don't have prior authorization, then you can get into trouble. That's the 1 million rand fine or 1 year in prison. And civil remedies are the majority of POPI. But don't underestimate the civil remedies, because everything gets put out in the public domain. So if reputational risk is actually your biggest headache, usually. Maintaining data quality through participation. And just to say that on the civil liability side, we don't actually have a precedent in South Africa yet about a civil case resulting in financial penalty. So until that happens, account numbers are your biggest risk. All right, maintaining data quality through participation. So I've got 3 key points today. The first is we need to be purposeful. In other words, have a purpose. The second point is maintaining data quality over time is fundamental to it's one of the requirements under POPI, which I'll open up now. And the third thing is, as we maintain data, the role of the data subject in maintaining their own data comes into focus. So you need to enable participation. POPI talks about data subject participation. They have a right to participate. So we need to talk about how to manage that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah. So if you are a controller or responsible party, your key obligations at this point, what we're going to talk about today, is you've got to know what the purpose is, why we process, why are we maintaining this data? Because remember, maintaining the data is processing the data. So what is the purpose behind us having this data? How do we maintain data quality, and how do we enable participation? The key controls that you can put in place. The record of processing activity is a very helpful tool. Under POPI, it is not absolutely required. But I think it gives a level of granularity and detail that makes it easier, I think, to manage the stuff going forward. Quality and data stewardship are closely linked. If you don't have ownership over the data, and if you don't have clearly defined stewardship roles, maintaining data quality is going to be very difficult. And how it's going to speak to that. I put in one of his slides in there, Howard. And then the participation procedures. So making sure that you are actually enabling participation. If you are, however, if you're one of the suppliers, if you're a hosting service provider, or you are a managed services provider, or a business process outsourcing partner, or a vendor, anything, your role really is to stop maintaining the data when you should no longer have it. In other words, get rid of it, right? So retention policies is one of your key things. So you shouldn't be maintaining data if you no longer have a contract with the customer and you have no legal obligation to have that data. There's literally no reason for you to have that data. So you should be getting rid of it. Your role in maintaining data subject participation is to enable that, to support that. So to whatever extent, depending on your data, depending on your relationship with your role with the customer, but definitely your DPA, your data processing agreement, and your service level agreement should be talking about participation and retention. So your key controls should talk about these things and explain to you, what does this customer need? Because remember, your customer is the one with the controller or responsible party obligation. They are the ones that must call the shots. And the way they do that is they need to distill their legal obligations as a responsible party into the agreement and the SLA with you. The only real obligation on a processor is to protect the data, security. All right, that's your absolute focus area. The real trick, though, I'm going to show you one way where you can stop being an operator and become a responsible party. And the key thing there is you must always act under instruction. So your controls are that either your instruction comes from the contract, the SLA, or it must come from some sort of a ticket or some sort of request, or something that you could prove in court that you were given an instruction to do something to the data. Okay, so as you maintain the data, or anything that you do with the data must come from an instruction from the responsible party. Okay, you can't start determining the processing yourself. Is there any questions on that? I know that's a lot of information in 2 short slides.
Yes, I've got my hand up, Caroline.
Sure.
I actually find this very fascinating and very helpful from a data management point of view, because one of the dimensions we really battle with is accuracy. And the concept is matching the real world. And am I assuming correctly that when we talk about data subject participation, we can reach out to them and basically say to them that from a participation point of view, please can you complete and make sure that all of this information is up to date? Is that gives us almost so it's not like we have to play all sorts of games of, we're phoning you to find out how you are, will you please confirm this data? Now we can actually go with a more, because I've been in that situation where we just don't understand what the right data is, and so we reach out and we sort of, we make up a script to be able to encourage the person to share information with us. And sometimes they get suspicious, but this seems a whole lot nicer and a whole lot more formal to be able to say, this is part of our duty.
Yes, it's part of your duty and it's part of their rights as a data subject. So, you know, for me as a data subject, you know, we're very quick to kick up the dust, you know, when we're unhappy about something and say, I have rights, you know. But the point is, you do have rights, but those come with almost come with a responsibility as well. That you need to be on top of whether your data is accurate. So the more that you can help the data subject to do that, the better. I'm very in favor of portals where you allow the person to log in and manage their data, right?
Yeah.
At the very minimum, let them see the data. Like that's kind of a key. But I have seen it where I am a customer of an organization and I have an app and it gives me a portal and I looked at the data and it seemed correct, but as soon as I asked for a formal letter from them, it had the wrong address. So clearly the address was coming from the wrong data source.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're going to go a little bit today as well. All right, so the first thing is be purposeful. I quite enjoyed this picture. I asked Canva to come up with an image showing a completely random combination of life of pi elements. Yeah, artificial intelligence lives in a very strange universe, apparently. So, but I thought it got the point across. You know, it's like, what is that? Why do you have it? That doesn't look right. So, yeah, what are we doing? So when we talk about lawfully processing data lawfully, or the lawful data process, I'm not talking about awful data processing. I'm talking about lawful data processing. The conditions for lawful processing, every single one of them must be met. You have to have accountability. So this is you as a responsible party. You have to have accountability. You have to have security in place for you and your suppliers. You have to be clear about your purpose specification. We're going to talk about that today. And we're going to touch on processing and further processing, because purpose specification can change if we start using the data for something else. And further processing has there's limits to what all you can do with the data. Your data quality is the thing we're going to really focus on today, and participation. Okay. So just to go back again to your number one risk. So here's like just a simple little to-do list, right? Know which data qualifies as an account number. So if you look at all your data sets, which of that data qualifies as an account number under POPI? POPI places the burden of responsibility on you that you ought to know what you do with an account number. You can't turn around and say, oh, I didn't realize my supplier was doing that. Or, oh, yeah, I mean, we thought we secured all the numbers, but you know what, actually, yeah, there was this other system and we did a backup, and then the backup tape would, you know, you ought to know what you're doing with account numbers, bottom line, right? And then, is your processing likely to result in substantial damage or distress to the data subject? So that's one of the checkboxes that the regulator will look at if they do leverage a fine. So obviously, the quantity of account numbers you're managing, but let's say you've got a handful of people's accounts, but they're worth a couple of million, right? If they're worth a lot of money, it's kind of likely to cause substantial damage. And your obligation as a responsible party is to make sure that your suppliers are clear about what they may or may not do with account numbers. And by the way, that substantial damage or distress to the data subject is very, very subjective. So the account has got maybe 500 Rand in it. But if that person is on a SASSA grant, that 500 Rand is a lot of money. So you really have to take it from the perspective of the data subject. It might be that, yes, it's only 500 Rand, but it results in distress to the data subject because it creates an element of like they feel like they can't trust their service provider. And the regulator will take all of that into account when it's a very subjective. It's just very subjective. And this is literally the one, like there are literally a handful of ways of getting a 10 million Rand fine, and this is one of them. You do have a get out of jail free card for the responsible party. In fact, the supplier has one as well. But the responsible party can say, we took reasonable steps to comply with the conditions of lawful processing. So those colorful blocks I showed you. If you can demonstrate that you've taken reasonable steps to comply with those conditions for the account numbers, in all its formats and copies and locations and distributions and sharings and whatever else is going on. You know, you can back up your story with that if you do have a data breach. One of the ways that you can show reasonable steps, this is now entirely my opinion. The regulator has not given any indication this is the case, but just based on the way that GDPR works, based on all the best practices around managing privacy, a record of processing activities, a register of processing activities is a very key control in any privacy program. And it's the aim of it is to help you to break down what it is that you do with the particular data. And you can ring fence things like, so for example, in this case, the human resources personnel file under POPI, I would kind of first worry about the payroll and then worry about the personnel files because of that account number, the emphasis on account numbers. So if you have to prioritize, use the penalties to help you. You do have to manage all of it though. And this is the exemplar that came out of the template that the UK ICO provided for a register of processing activities. I personally hate spreadsheets, and I'm sure you all do. So maintaining the spreadsheet gets very big. It's got quite a lot of columns in it. It's a lot of detail. Maintaining that is going to be a nightmare. The sooner you can get your register of processing activities into some sort of sensible database, the better. If you are not in the position to develop a database or just quickly put together a system, or if you don't have access to a privacy management system, dedicated, purposeful system, one thing that you could use for a register is if your IT help desk has got a help desk system that includes a CMDB, a configuration management database, right? Those are extremely helpful for data like this. It's basically a graph database. And given that this is a Dharma meetup, I'm hoping everyone knows what a graph database is. So essentially, you've got items with relationships to items. And that's exactly what a CMDB is. You can define the items, you can define the categories of items, and then the relationships between the items. So you can have parent-child, and you can have relates to, supports, hosts, backs up, whatever it might be, deletes. And you can map out, like, for example, your payroll system, who accesses your payroll system, which service providers have access to the payroll system, and the fact that it's got account data in it. And that can be quite nicely managed through the change control of your IT help desk. So that's just a quick tip from me. If you are managing spreadsheets and it's becoming a nightmare, ask your IT support guys if they have a help desk tool that includes a CMDB. And they really are very nice. Yeah, they're just very nice little databases that are easy to use. Any thoughts on that, Howard?
Yeah, I do. I just go back to your last screen. I sort of would like to ask you two questions. The last screen that you had was on account information, and the one that I found very interesting was that the stress to the data subject, and it was very subjective. And when we do data quality in data management, one of the things we talk about is fit for purpose, and meets the needs of the consumer. And this means that you actually have to interview quite a few different people to be able to understand, well, what's their purpose and what's appropriate, what's your expectation of quality. And this seems to be going down this track where we have to apply it according to the consumer and what whether it meets their requirements. Is that's sort of what it seems to be coming to?
Yeah, I think if you just put yourself in their position, I think you can pretty quickly decide. Another way that you can do it. So when I put together a governance program, what I always do is I say, if you have obligations, you figure out what your defensible position is going to be. So we have the obligation to do this. And our defensible position is going to be to implement. So, for example, you have an obligation to secure the account numbers.
Yeah.
Your defensible position is to adopt a international best practice or a standard. And for account numbers, just leverage PCI DSS, the payment card industry data security standard. Just extend it to all. Besides, you might be applying it. It's intended to be applied to credit card numbers. You just extend it to apply to everything that has.
So that would mean that we would need to encrypt basically all of the account numbers, use RSA protection level, and encrypt all of these account numbers. Is that correct?
Yeah, or make it so that if I did get access to that data, I would have no clue what I'm looking at, or that if I mean, yes, so whatever, if you're looking at PCI DSS, then yes, apply the way you would manage credit card account details, try to manage it that way. If that gets too expensive, you can say that's too expensive, and then move on to other security controls.
Right.
The point is take a defensible position. So,
right.
And one of the ways you can do it, what you were talking about, sort of looking at what is it that the data subject, how would the data subject feel about this? One of the ways that you demonstrate that you've done your due diligence is through a privacy impact assessment. POPI calls it a personal information impact assessment. GDPR calls it a privacy impact assessment, I think, or data protection impact assessment. Anyway, there's an impact assessment somewhere along the line, and the main sort of thrust of an impact assessment is to consider the impact on the data subject. So it's almost like what consequence would, it's exactly like doing a risk register for a company, where you say what would the impact be on the company, what would the likelihood be. With the privacy impact assessment, you say what would the impact be on the data subject, how difficult would it be for them to recover from that data breach, how much potential damage or distress would they suffer, and you give that a numeric score from 0 to 5, and then you do your normal risk matrix. And if anyone wants to know what that looks like, please contact me. I'll show you the privacy impact assessment methodology that I use to create a risk register for privacy.
And then moving on to the RoPA, one of the things that I found was an access database with this information. With the RoPA thing that gives you all the drop downs and reference data and stuff like that. So if anybody's interested, I'd be happy to provide access database, and you can work from there as well.
Cool. Yeah, I honestly, anything other than spreadsheets is good. I would caution against using SharePoint lists. I have seen people trying to implement this in SharePoint under SharePoint lists. They are two-dimensional. It falls apart very, very quickly. You really need a relational database or a graph database. Graph database is an absolute one, but if you have even a relational database, will get you really far.
It's about, as you said, it's about starting and getting it going and under control, so that if it has to go to somewhere else, at least there's a standard place, and then you can convert from a standard to somewhere. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
Exactly, right, and know what you're managing. Right, so now onto something completely different. I was talking about processing, and I'm going to talk about further processing. If you take the data that you've got and you start using it for something like direct marketing, inviting people to your golf day, asking your employees to contribute to a Mandela Day, selling things, promoting things, any sales, any promotion, whatever, that becomes direct marketing. You are immediately a responsible party, and you have got to get consent. And that's a case like, so for example, I can't take my payroll data and use that data to ask my employees to contribute to something, leverage that data. What you can't use data for further processing. And the only thing I wanted to warn against is if you are an operator, or you're a supplier or a hosting service or somebody like that, don't get clever about the way you use your customers' data. You might feel like, oh, legitimate interest. The customer needs to know about what we do, so therefore we're going to spam all my customers' customers to tell them about our products and services because it's in my customer's best interest. No, that is direct marketing, that's promotion. So just be very careful about taking the data and running with it, especially for direct marketing. And there are kind of ways, checks and balances to know whether your further processing is moving too far from your original purpose. So the RoPA is there to help you to remember what the original purpose was. When you're moving to further processing, just ask yourself, like, would the data subject feel surprised to get an email asking them to come to a golf day? They might be delighted that they'll get an opportunity to wear their very fancy pants, but they might be a little surprised that it came from your organization because they didn't expect you to be contacting them in that way for that purpose. Okay, so always think about the data subject. Would they be surprised? Okay, that's kind of the goal.
Caroline, there's a request from, or a question from Abra asking how to manage the papaya compliance when companies use cookies in marketing. There's cookies on the website and information like that.
Well, interestingly, the regulator has, I think it's tomorrow, there's going to be a forum to discuss that with the regulator. Well, the direct marketing specifically, I'm going to raise cookies. Cookies are a lovely word. I feel like the word cookie should be done away with. I think we should start saying, are we allowed to sell your data indiscriminately to anybody who asks us? I think that would be a better thing, because we all know about functional cookies and the required cookies and all that. We get that. We need those things. But the targeted advertising cookies is the one you're actually asking about, because that's the one we care about. And targeted, it falls under direct marketing, absolutely. You are promote your indirect or direct purpose is to promote. And it is unsolicited. In other words, I did not ask for it. The cookie notice is there to aid transparency and consent. But the bottom line is you mustn't forget that is direct marketing if you are going to use it for targeted advertising. And that includes
just want to check.
Yeah.
Just want to check with Abra whether she feels that you've answered the question in terms of how that relates to Poppy. Okay, she said it's great. Thank you very much.
Right, cool. So yeah, another whole topic. It's complex, but yeah, cookies on the whole, usually direct marketing. EU's laws, the UK law is the PECR, and the EU has a law, I think it's EPR. I can't remember now if that's the only one now, but they go beyond personal information, right? So they talk about specifically targeting people with messaging. So it sort of extends a little bit outside of pure personal information. This is just the definition of direct marketing. If you need help with direct marketing, please contact me. It is another hour's discussion. Okay, let's talk about quality. Do not turn your tiger into an elephant. Again, this is quite clever. It's such fun, by the way, making these images. Alrighty, let's talk about quality. It's one of the conditions for lawful processing. When I broke up Poppy, I asked myself, I read every single clause. I kept it on. I read every single clause. And I said to myself, who in an organization should know about this? Either managing it or know about it or take control of this. And it broke out into these 20 distinctish sort of functions in an organization. And here we have the entire problem with privacy management is that it does not have a natural home. Increasingly, we are seeing bigger organizations are obviously creating data privacy offices, and they have entire functions around it now. And I had the question again the other day. Shouldn't IT look after it? No. If anybody is going to have ownership of the data, or ownership for data stewardship, it would be whoever is originating the data. So, like the ones that are colored in here are potentially parts of the business or functions in the business that are maybe collecting information, where they have sort of stewardship over the information. And on that note, I wanted Howard to just talk to you briefly about the way that master data and data stewardship comes together with privacy. So over to you, Howard.
Thank you. And I actually I would like to, I'm going to put the slide in the deck. There's actually something that I would like to share, Caroline. It's about, in architecture, we have a way of determining ownership. There's a technique within data architecture in terms of how to determine ownership, and it talks to almost what you're suggesting here. So just if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll open that document.
All right, we have 15 minutes left for this talk, right? So
okay,
I'll stop sharing. You go.
Okay, so I'm just going to share one slide. Okay, so if I share this slide, you can see some of the, you'll see some of the information. I just want to, it's got some notes on as well. So basically what we do is we break up our data according to subject area, high-level subject area model, and then we have the business processes on top. Maybe I should go into full screen mode. Is it possible for you to see it there? Can everyone see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so there's the subject area. These are the high-level entities of business concepts within your organization, and this is the business processes that operate on that data. That's sort of what you get in the RoPA, and then you can label it as who does the create, who does the read, update, and delete, and then you can see where that does. And the first point we take is those people that create the data. That's the right place to have the initial data ownership. That's where we start on the data ownership flag. So that goes to what you were saying in terms of who creates the data. And the reason we do that is that a lot of the times the quality is determined by the creation process. Yes, there may be some people that update, but a lot of times it's about the initial creation of the data. And here we can see, as we move along the business process, we've got different areas that create the data, and that would go to the council, and we say, okay, this is our recommended area of people who should own the data. I don't know if that makes sense, Caroline.
Yeah, and it's good to have an approach like that that's thought through. I was once involved in a project that tried to uniquely identify a particular. It was long before properly. It was back in my IT days, and we had a master data management function that had just started up, and we wanted to uniquely identify a particular group of people. I could not believe how incredibly difficult it was. None of the data capture systems had been designed with the idea in mind that you could uniquely identify this person across multiple business functions. Right. As a result, it just became, and you would think, oh, ID number, obviously, or no, a date of birth and surname, or no, as soon as you drill down into it, it is diabolical. So if you can think about it up front and all agree, you can move that forward. And actually, I once worked for an asset management company who were dealing with very high value individuals, and they had an amazing design in their systems where right from word go, they had agreed that nobody in the organization would know which individual person they're dealing with. The only people who would have access to the actual identifying information would be the people who have the relationship with the individual, so the financial planners. Everybody else would just have a unique number, and that number would be permeated through all the systems. So I found that quite interesting. It was quite an amazing approach.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that they talk about within PCI DSS is that you should be storing your data relating to the card. You should never have more than one or two pieces of information about the card in the same database, and you should be separating. You should be separating that away and have your master data system and really just your custom ID or your account number, and then link it like that. So very important
it's a real need to know basis, right? So
Yeah.
I was recently involved in a form realignment where there was a paper form being used to capture personal information, and we eventually split it out into 3 different forms. And it takes a lot of negotiating to do that, because there's reasons for having it on one form. You know, there's a lot of efficiency and business operations that are data capture processes that are made more efficient because it's all on one piece of paper. But having that one piece of paper with all that data on is too much risk to the data subject.
Yeah.
So you've got to get that negotiation going. You've got to have some kind of a agreement across all the different functions in the business as to, because everything you decide, without that ownership, you can't make those decisions that are going to negatively impact the rest of the organization.
Right.
So your rights of your data subject are absolutely linked to that data ownership. And somebody has got to protect the rights of the data subject.
Now, if we go back to your slides, on that slide, what I've started to realize, and one of my challenges on data privacy, is those subject areas, for example, customer and employee, are typically broken up into different areas, and you typically have different data owners. Now, what you'll find with a lot of the master data systems, they use that party master data, and employee is just a role, and so is customer. They have the party and then employee and customer, and that's where we get to another level of complexity, where I actually like this data subject has helped me a lot to be able to explain it to people, is to say, you know, that employee, customer, vendor, they're just roles that people and companies play within the organization, and having that level of abstraction or focusing your master data at a data subject level is very helpful for them to understand that there are all these different people, all the different roles that are involved.
Yeah, and you when you make an impression on somebody through one of the roles that they have with you, so maybe they're a customer and an employee, if they have a negative experience with one or the other, they're not going to compartmentalize that in their minds. You know, that person had a negative experience. So and I like exactly that whole master party indexing makes so much sense when you're thinking about a data subject's point of view.
Right. And I think with that slide was Informatica came out really quickly out of the gates, because they had all of the different master data, and then they brought in the data privacy, and they implemented this data subject straight away. So they're very quick to come out.
It's a very natural progression, right? To go from master data and specifically master party to, you know, privacy and data subject perspective.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you.
It does make it essential, but you can't make your data management team responsible for all of the lawful processing, right? So they can't be responsible for quality from the point of view of, like, there's a lot of quality they can't be in control of. Like they can't determine the purpose. Those 8 conditions of lawful processing cannot be managed by your data management team or function.
Yeah, and what
Even
we do is
party index is such a natural home.
Yeah.
So
what we do is get the business people to become our data owners, and then they would elect our data stewards to handle that data and manage the quality on the data. So the actual technical data management people should be staying away from it and handing that more over to the business people that interact with those entities or subjects.
Which leads us into the idea of authorized access. So one of the ways we maintain quality is by controlling access. And the one way we do that is by making sure we've got clear authorization. So that we understand the protocol. If somebody wants access to amend this thing, even read the data, but never mind that, if they want to amend the data or delete the data, that access is granted based on an authorization process. And that authorization process has to come from ownership. So we're determining the role that anybody in the organization plays on managing the data has got to be done. Now, the problem is that in structured data, that is fairly easy to manage. When it comes to unstructured data, like file shares, it is diabolically difficult to manage. And things do weird things, like Windows directories on file shares will cascade permissions. So if you change a permission access on a parent folder, it will cascade the permissions down. Very often is what happens, and people don't notice it, they don't realize it. And it's very difficult to spot because there's no real centralized view. So without like a very expensive system like Varonis or something, you actually, it's very difficult to know exactly who's got access to which folder. And that's where I think if you're going to move data around, say, for example, from a file share to SharePoint, design your access first, design your authorization process first, design your role groups first, and then go with the principle of least privilege, so that if you just be on top of the idea that data breaches don't always happen.
Sorry, Caroline. Sorry, Caroline. For some reason, you've gone on mute. I wonder if you wouldn't mind, if you could just. There we go.
I saw that. I was like, no, that can't be right because I never pressed the mute button. Is that a keystroke? How long have I been on mute?
Yeah. For the last, I think, about 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Sorry,
Okay,
apologies for that.
No worries. I was just saying that there was this Forbes research that thanks. This Forbes research that showed that 95% of companies' folders are not properly protected. So when we talk about data quality, just remember it's got to be maintained. There's one person with one set of data, and it doesn't matter how much you duplicate that and spread that and scatter that, sneeze that across all of your data stores. All of those data stores have got to be protected. Okay. And all of those data stores have got to be managed to a degree of quality. Now,
you've gone on mute again.
I see what it is. I had the focus on the meeting window, so every time I hit enter, it didn't change the slide. It put me on mute. So when we want to talk to employees about data quality, when we want to talk to them about security, we want to talk to them about authorizing access properly. We want to talk to them about making the pain of splitting out a form into 3 different forms instead of 1 form, the pain of going through the process of, like, the process that Howard was showing of, like, making sure that we've got a procedure in place to get our master data correct. What you really need is to become an expert in persuasive communications. Social sciences has shown that there are 4 ways to persuade people. The one is fear. So you can literally just put fear into these people, right? You can threaten all sorts of things. And it's the problem with fear, though, is that it was shown that yes, it's very effective, but for a very short amount of time. People very quickly decide that they can accept that fear, that risk, and they don't want to live in a state of fear. So we very quickly stop. The other way you do it is through guilt, make people feel guilty. Probably not a great company culture, so maybe not the way to go. The other way is open discourse, and this is something that you should actively encourage in your organization when it comes to data quality, is to make sure that people have ways of speaking to each other about data quality, making sure they are speaking about maintaining data in a way that is going to be in the best interests of the data subject. However, a lot of it boils down to culture and attitude and beliefs, and those are things that are difficult to really shift in a person, even through open discourse. However, there is one way. We have a hack. There's a hack for humans that changes you can't really change a person's values, but you could definitely change their attitudes and their beliefs. And that is through group polarization. And what this means is that you get people from different departments to talk about the subject or the problem or the process, and to come to an agreement. Obviously, you want a change agent there who's going to drive the conversation towards the outcome that you're looking for. But by getting people from different cultures together to talk around a table, they will influence each other into a group attitude, a group belief system. And in fact, those beliefs and attitudes become more deeply ingrained than they would have been had the person been persuaded one-on-one. It's quite interesting. It's the whole research around it. So it's actually quite a healthy thing that data privacy is forcing companies to think about the flow of data through the entire organization and into suppliers who are completely different culture. In my experience, an organization has lots of different cultures internally. We talk about the culture of the company. However, if you think about the difference between your IT department, your marketing department, your finance department, and your HR department, they are different cultures. And they have different priorities in the way that they handle the different attitudes towards different procedures and processes. So try to mix it up when you talk about these things. Whenever you're talking about a cross-functional issue, try to mix it up by getting different people from different functions to talk to each other.
So Caroline, maybe I can add, we actually had a talk from a culture expert on how the different cultures interpret numbers and visualizations. And they actually broke it up into 4. You have your controlling culture group, and that would typically be things like your auditors and stuff like that. You then also have your competitive people, like your sales, you have innovation, and the other one was collaboration. And they actually, what they do is they go around the table and say, okay, this culture perceives this visualization to mean this. And each group had a perception on what it meant. And they documented, and then they had this score on what was your dominant culture by group and by individual. And they were then able to say, this is how the interpretation happened of that dashboard or graph or whatever it is. And he found it even in your BI that if you break them up into those areas, then you can see the different reaction.
Yeah, and it's super interesting when you and what's nice to me though is that the whole social sciences discipline is super relevant to maintaining stuff like data quality. And it's something it's important to remember that it's all driven by people. So I'm aware that we're at 5 o'clock. I'm going to take liberty of taking another 5 minutes if everyone can manage it. Just to quickly run through what participation is all about. This, by the way, is how Canva's AI perceives a IT manager. So, but IT manager in the context of the Life of Pi, which is a story about Indian people. So, so it's fair. You and your suppliers have got to honor the rights of data subjects under POPI. So you have got to have a contract with your supplier. Like I said, your controls, right? DPA with maybe the standard contractual clauses, your data processing agreement, standard contractual clauses, your SLA, very important, and then instructions from your customer. If you are the customer, if you are the responsible party, the rights of your data subjects, you have to notify them. You have to allow them to participate. They're allowed to query, what data have you got about me? They're allowed to tell you to update it. They're allowed to object you to you processing it. So it's complete transparency. Under GDPR, there's a transfer request, so you have to give it to them in people readable and machine readable formats, so that they can leverage the data. And they have to be informed of data breaches. So participation is an obligation, is part of the rights of the data subjects, and your number one requirement is do not interfere with the rights of the data subjects, right? You have to make this possible. So when you're setting up if you're passing data over to a supplier, you've got to think about how are we going to make sure that the supplier will also honor the rights of the data subject. It's not enough to just think about your own CRM. So this is essentially just what I've said to you now. The penalty attached to this, if you don't do it, is civil case. It's not like you're going to just get slapped with a 10 million rand fine, but it all talks to each other. It all links up together at the end. If you have lots of unhappy data subjects, there will be some sort of impact eventually. And you have to make it easy for data subjects to exercise their rights. One of the ways you have to do that is to make clear who you are, what data you process, and why you process it, and who you share it with. And under POPI, that was under the documentation requirement. Under GDPR, it's very specific. It's the RoPA specifically. But in POPI, it just said documentation. And mostly that has been, and it was documentation similar to the PIA manual, the Promotion of Access to Information manual, which is another piece of South African legislation. Your PIA manual should really summarize all these things. That should summarize what you do and how you do it and when you do it and who you share it with. It is a summary. You shouldn't be disclosing stuff there that's going to cause security issues for your organization, but definitely make it clear who you are and who can I contact to get more information. So be very transparent with the data subject. You can't enable participation if I don't know who to call, right? So if I'm seeing something and I think you're the data, and then you tell me, no, I'm just a supplier. I don't actually have, like, I'm not the responsible party for that. That's not helping me. It's like, you need to tell me who the responsible party is. And I need to be clear about who to contact, how to contact them. Okay. And in your privacy notices, now, I know we call them privacy policies. Things on your website are notices, okay? They're giving me a notice about my rights as a data subject. One of the things you must always include, apologies, one of the things you must always include is the information office, the information regulators details. So you tell the person, you have got the right to complain. This is how you do it. You go to the information regulator's website. Here's the email. Here's the website link. You make it as easy as possible for them to reach out and to protect their own rights. Okay. And keep it clear. Don't make it obscure. Okay, just keep it very obvious. The regulator does request reports like this from public bodies, from public institutions, but can request it from private institutions. So I'll leave this here. You'll have the slide back. You can read through it, but it essentially is the statistics about participation. And this is just like, the exam question, the exam answer. You've got a heads up of what the question's going to be. So go and interrogate that and make sure that you understand what type of metadata you need to be keeping about your participation. So just to summarize, when you're maintaining personal information, you need to track the purpose, right? You need to make sure the data subject participation is possible by the data subject, and then you've got to think through that procedure from beginning to end to make sure that that flow of, that workflow works. Think of it as a service to your customers. Respond to data subject access requests and inform them of their right to correct their personal information. You need to manage data quality. These are the sections in POPI, by the way, that refer to this. Respond to the data subject requests to correct information. You might respond to the negative. You might respond and say, sorry, we can't do that. But you do have to respond. Data portability is a requirement under GDPR. So if there's somebody who happens to be in the EU or in the UK, you do have to cater for data portability as well. Just extend it to everybody and let everybody have data portability. Have adequate security measures, and we'll also have your contracts and underpinning SLAs in place. Plan and practice your data breach response and your PR communications. It's something I'll tackle in a future talk in some detail, but do understand how one of the ways that you protect the rights of the data subject is that when you have a data breach, you've got to give them the right information. You've got to help them. So yeah, plan how you're going to do that as part of your participation procedures as well. And then this is just the last slide. These are all the different pillars of I call them my pillars of my checklist. So think about your purpose, think about participation, think about quality and security. And in my other talks, I actually go through the other stuff. That, justification was one we did when last time, I think. So that'll be the slide pack for you to reference. And that's it. Those are the 3 legs of the 3 areas of maintaining a data that I decided were important to focus on for this purpose. Good. So hope to see you next month when we talk about using personal information. So second Wednesday of the month. We'll look at the different ways that we use data, and then in August we'll look at how we get the data. So if you have questions on any of these topics, please feel free to throw them at me in LinkedIn, and I'll make sure we cover them in the future talks as well. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Caroline. I'd just like to ask, just give an opportunity to any of the participants. Is there anyone who would like to ask a more detailed question or something that you haven't put up? if you could raise your hands, we'll add them in the chat. I'm watching the chat, but is there anyone who'd like to ask any more detailed questions? That's a bit surprising. I think that's the first time when we haven't.
Everyone's like, oh, step 5, gotta go.
Yeah. Fantastic. That was very surprising. Excellent. Everybody, thank you very much.
Reach out. Do reach out in any questions at all.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Howard. It was a very informative session.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a
Andrew.
lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it
Alex.
was really nice. Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Cheers, man.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers. Ah.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the Life of Pi images in there. They're great.
Okay.
Thank you. And thanks
Caroline,
for
I wanted to actually share with you. I should have posted or tagged you on LinkedIn. Someone said, look what I generated on Canva, or whatever it is, and there it was, a tiger. And I thought,
yeah, Canva's got much better at tigers since I was around.
Yes, it has. It actually looked.
They're getting better.
Yeah, they are getting better. Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Cheers. Bye. Thanks, Caroline. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Howard. We'll catch you later.
Right. Bye.
Okay.